Who's got it the worst when it comes to dealing with Karens? Well, according to these stories, it's food service workers. These servers in this video had to put up with ridiculously entitled behavior, and it all culminates with an intensely scary face-off between a barista and a man who wanted a soda so bad he was willing to get arrested for it. I was working at an ice cream stand at a park. I had a lady come to the window with her 2 children. It was busy and the line was long. I took the order for her daughter, and then her son said he had to pee. I expected her to take him to the bathroom. Nope. She took her son to the side of our building and had him pee there, even though there was a perfectly good tree about a few feet away, and we had a bathroom that we allowed kids to use. She was taking a long time, and the line was wrapping around the building. So I took the next customer while she allowed her son to let loose all over our building. She then came back and stepped in front of the lady, saying she was ready. I asked her to give me a minute since I was almost finished with the customer that she had just stepped in front of. She started to yell really loud about how unprofessional I was and how I had terrible customer service. I then explained to her that while she had her son pee on the side of the building, I decided to try and get the next person out of the way. She went on to deny that her son had peed on the building, and she said she would like to speak to my manager. I gave her his number and wrote down my name for her to tell him, which angered her even more. She waited to get her stuff, screaming the whole time as I was making it, then huffed off. The people behind her apologized for the way she acted and told me I was doing a great job. It's one thing to be a garden variety Karen, but it's a whole different ballgame to stop an entire transaction when there's a line of people around you and then let your kid urinate on a public building. I think there's one defining characteristic of a Karen. It's the inability to admit fault. At least this poor employee had the other customers on her side in the end. I was a server at Olive Garden for 2 years. It was a typical busy night during our never-ending pasta bowl time of year. One of my first tables of the evening was a family of 5, a mom, dad, 2 sons, and a little girl around 2 or 3. They were all exceedingly overweight, and the daughter had on a dirty shirt and no pants, just a diaper. When I checked back on them, I noticed an overwhelming scent lingering around the table. I returned with some refills, and the odor was just as intense as before. On my way around the table to pass out beverages, I passed the high chair and noticed the little girl had her hand in her diaper. Her next move almost had me sick. I watched her pull out her mess and throw it on the floor to join an even larger one that was already there, slightly covered by a napkin. I could not hide the disgust on my face. I don't remember exactly the words I used, but I turned to the parents and said, your daughter has a situation going on over here. The mother replied, yeah, I know. I threw that napkin over it, then continued to devour her 3rd refill of never-ending pasta. I was in disbelief. Not only were there 2 pieces of fresh poo on the floor, but the girl's hands were obviously covered in it, and not one family member seemed to care in the slightest. One of the brothers asked me for another Dr. Pepper while I was standing there still in shock. I immediately told the manager on duty, and she didn't believe me. I told her to go see for herself. She politely asked the mother to clean it up immediately, and even gave her disinfectant wipes. That's when the mom blew her top. She claimed it was not her job, and she felt discriminated against that we would ask her to do such a thing. She demanded everything to be paid for. She picked it up, but she didn't wash her hands, didn't clean her daughter, and continued to finish the meal. I thought it was over, that they would pay and leave, but it wasn't. As I was dropping the check, the mom said, it's my son's birthday. Don't y'all sing and give us dessert? I told her she must be thinking of another restaurant. Whenever I hear a story like this, I'm mostly amazed that the person telling it didn't just walk off the job right there. I know everyone's got rent and bills to pay, myself included, but Once human waste enters the picture, I straight up walk out of there. No 2 weeks notice. You get a 2-minute notice so I can explain why I'm going, and then I leave. I had been working at this Thai place in my town for about 8 months. I had seen the same teenage couple come in every Sunday and leave 0% tip regardless of service. One day my boss decided enough was enough. She told me, "I don't care whose turn it is, you will take them next week, and you make sure you earn that 0%. I did a bit of a double take. She couldn't possibly have meant what I thought she did. I said, "Sorry, do you mean I should treat them terribly?" She nodded and gave me a smile that was equal parts devious and smug. A week later, 5 minutes into my shift, they came in. My boss sat them in my section, smiled at me, and told me to do my worst. So that is what I did. I waited a good 5 minutes before going to greet them. They were ready to order, but I told them I didn't have a pen and would be right back. I went out back and had a small break instead. They were my only table and I wasn't handling food yet, so I didn't wash my hands and I reeked of smoke. I took the girl's order, and as the guy went to open his mouth to tell me he would have the same, I gave him the "just a minute" finger and pulled out my phone. I texted my fiancé and asked him what he wanted for dinner. Then I somehow misunderstood their order and wrote down extra bean sprouts. Their food came up while I was telling my boss and the other waitress a story about my cat. After a long conversation with them, I finally brought out their food. I walked away as they were starting to complain about the sprouts. About 5 minutes after they got their food, I got a second table. It was a friend of mine from a former job, and we spent a few minutes catching up. The zero tippers were trying to signal me, but I ignored them. I came back to take the other table's order and started tending to them for every minor thing. As I was walking over with their appetizers, the zero tippers stopped me and asked for boxes. I told him I'd grab them right after I dropped off this food. I then played a game on my phone for a bit before bringing them one small box. They asked for 2 bigger boxes and the check. I promised I would be right back and asked my boss to keep an eye on the table while I went to take another break. When I came back, my boss told me the zero tippers came to her for boxes and to pay. They also told her they were never coming back. But the cherry on top? My boss voided their check, gave me the $40 they paid for their meals, and told me I earned it. There's nothing quite like a boss who takes your side when you really need it. It's just such a rare surprise, especially in the service industry. And on top of that, the plan they came up with was absolutely devious. Getting to act out being the worst server in the world when you're used to busting your butt for tips has to be the most satisfying thing in the world. A lady and her husband came in. Before sitting down, she grabbed my wrist and said she had a terrible allergy to white wine. She even said, "If you feed me white wine, I will die." So I ran around, double and triple checking recipes, ensuring the kitchen was ready so that her food would be safe when she ordered it. Her husband ordered the special. I made sure to tell her not to eat any of his meal because it was dressed with a butter sauce that was made with white wine, and I would like her to survive her dining experience. I brought out their food, and the first thing she did was take a big old forkful of her hubby's special. I cried out in dismay as she shoved it in her mouth. While chewing, she said, "Oh, one bite won't hurt." She also single-handedly put every server on the floor in the weeds by flagging them down and asking them questions while they were trying to take care of their own sections. She topped it off by cornering another guest in the tiny corridor leading to the bathrooms to aggressively tell him that he was being too loud. Ah, yes, the fake allergy Karen. We all know one or heard a story involving one. Usually it's something like gluten, but you have to give tips for creativity when it comes to the phrase, "If you feed me white wine, I will die." I feel so bad for the server who ran around doing her best to accommodate her, only to watch her completely contradict herself. So annoying. I waited tables at a country club. I had a couple come in once, and as they were sitting down before I had even introduced myself, The woman was already complaining that they had to wait 5 minutes while we reset their table. She started off by telling me every time she gets the filet mignon, it is awful and cooked wrong. I suggested she try something else, but she declined and ordered it again. I gave the kitchen a heads up to make sure it was perfect, as to save us all a headache. Her steak came up and it seemed fine. I dropped her plate in front of her and I could see she had a smirk on her face indicating she was not amused. She grabbed her butter knife and hit the top of the steak with the flat part 3 times. At that point, I knew she was about to go off big time. She hadn't even cut into it or tasted it before saying, "This is disgusting." She had me take it back and bring her a new one, so of course we did, and she got her new one. She ate half of it and took the rest home. Before leaving, she wanted to talk to a manager. She complained profusely and got her whole meal free, along with the dessert, and left me a garbage tip. Some people are just determined to be miserable and make everyone around them miserable from the very get-go. There's a handful of restaurants I go to regularly, and if I don't like how they make something, I simply don't order it. I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand, but I guess this lady was just looking for a handout from the very beginning of this whole ordeal anyway. I used to work at Subway. There is a legendary customer that we only refer to as the crazy bacon lady whenever we tell this story. She was an older woman who had come in one day and asked how much a 6-inch BLT was. We told her it was $3.50 plus tax. She then proceeded to yell at us, saying it was $2 when she had come in the day before, even though she hadn't. It was the first time she had ever even been in our store. Not to mention the BLT was never at $2 in the 3 years I had worked there. She barked out her order the whole way up the line, saying such gems as, "I am a good Christian woman. I don't deserve to be treated this way. For $3.50, that bacon better be fresh. The service here is terrible. I'm never coming back, you hear me?" But then she got to my coworker who was manning the cash register. He told her that the total, including tax, was $3.68. She said, "You people are workers of the devil." She plopped down the exact change, snatched up her bag, and stormed out of the door. I don't think I know anyone who's ever worked at a Subway, but I firmly believe that they have some of the most insane customers around. This lady is a special case, of course, but I think she stacks up against some of the real weirdos I've been side by side with in line there, including the man who got a meatball sub without tomato sauce and covered it in ketchup. No other condiments. Even the employee looked scared. Every so often, this woman and her sister would come into the pizza place I worked at. They always started off the phone call with how much they loved our food, how fantastic the service was, stuff like that. Then they turned on me. We used homemade garlic oil on the crust, and they complained we never put enough garlic on the crust. So I told her we would make sure to put extra garlic on the crust. They came in, got their food, and left. 5 minutes later, they were back. She started grilling me on how there was almost no garlic on the pizza. I took a look at it, and there was considerably more garlic than average on that pizza. Not only did she get a free pizza, but she kept the one she had complained about. This happened a few more times, each time with more and more garlic. She got about 3 free pizzas total. I remembered the name that came up whenever they ordered, so a month later, when they called, and I saw her name come up, I prepared myself. I took their order, went through the garlic spiel, and ended the call. My manager and I were both fed up with her by that time. The garlic bottle needed to be refilled, but still had enough garlic for about 6 pizzas. My manager said, "Hey, watch this." He dumped the garlic on the entire pizza, not just the crust. It was an apocalypse of garlic. Lakes were forming on the pizza's cheese, and the crust was stained a bright, sickening yellow-orange. It soaked through the box and stained the table underneath it. It was truly an unhealthy amount of garlic for anyone. Had I seen it without context, I would likely advise not eating it. The woman showed up, opened the box, and seemed satisfied. She paid for her order and left. I was dumbfounded. I was seriously concerned about her well-being. She hasn't been back since. If there is one thing I learned in my years of working customer service, it's that sometimes the customer is right. And by that I mean that some people just won't be dissuaded from making ridiculous demands, no matter how many times you try to tell them it's a bad idea. So you just have to go along with it and give them exactly what they want. They can learn the hard way, even if the hard way is apparently death by garlic. A group of 10 came in to have drinks and sing karaoke for a birthday. I went around the table asking what each person would like and got to the princess of the group. She asked me for a drink menu and I told her I had a beer list, but not a cocktail menu. It was a dive bar after all. She asked about pineapple drinks and I told her we could do rum and pineapple called a pineapple upside down drink. She was still trying to figure it out when I had 2 more tables sit down. I was trying to speed it along, offering her more options, and she just kept asking, well, what other things do you have with pineapple? So I told her, you can pretty much make your own drink. Her facial expression immediately changed at that moment. I knew I had messed up. She took that like I was saying she could serve herself because I was done. She got incredibly angry and started making a scene, spewing expletives at me and calling me incompetent. So I backtracked and said, what I mean is we can start with a spirit and add pineapple and whatever other fruit or liquids you want. She finally just got a pineapple upside down drink. The night went on and everyone in her group was super chill. Except for her. She had daggers on me the entire time. They finally cashed out and I gave her her bill, which was $5.01. The place was cash only, so I asked if anyone needed change. Everyone said they were good and left. I looked at her ticket and she left me a $5 bill. Nothing else. She owed me a penny. I have many pet peeves, but if I had one pet peeve in particular, it's people who act like spoiled brats in dive bars. You have to be incredibly inexperienced or purposefully playing dumb to walk into a dive bar and expect them to make a bespoke cocktail for you. Do you walk into McDonald's and request the prime rib? Grow up. I was 7 months pregnant and working at McDonald's. Some customers would ask for orders to be brought to their table, which was fine. Some people are slightly disabled or have big orders and would rather watch their kids than wait for their food. I was carrying a big tray of food. That, along with my belly, meant I couldn't see my feet. There was a small stool in the middle of the floor that I didn't see. I tripped and fell and partially landed on my belly. As I slowly got up in shock, my colleagues ran to make sure I was okay. However, the customer walked over, stood over me, and then berated me for dropping her lunch and insisted I personally pay for a replacement. It's stories like this that make me want to say something insane, like, why don't we just put all the rude people on a plane and send them to a remote island where they cannot inflict any more misery on people just trying to get by in customer service jobs? I know, it's going too far, but would it really be so awful? I worked at a quick service restaurant and my store location was near some sort of convention center in Ottawa, which is Canada's capital. It's not a bilingual city in any official way, but a lot of people speak both English and French. I am most certainly not bilingual. I grew up in Western Canada where French is not a mandatory subject. Anyway, during one of my shifts, a woman was trying to order, but she was speaking French. Although I can get the gist of things if I hear certain words, she spoke rather fast, so I was having trouble. After a couple of minutes of going back and forth, trying to answer her questions, I turned to a bilingual coworker and asked her to help. That's when the woman said in totally perfect English, with as much disdain as she could muster, "This is Canada. We speak French and English." My mouth dropped, not only because of the comment, but because she understood me the whole time. She didn't even try to help me or make the interaction smooth. I couldn't wrap my mind around why someone would do that. All I could do was stare at her for a few seconds and walk away. It's one thing to pull a stunt like that in a city that's actually bilingual, but to do it in an English city is absolutely deranged. There's probably a whole other breed of French-speaking Karens up there creating nightmare scenarios for every server in their path. I certainly wouldn't want to tangle with one. A man came in alone. He looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s, and he gave me a bad impression from the get-go. He snapped at me to get my attention, and before I could speak, he said Coke with a lime wedge. We were a tiny little cafe without the funding for a machine or the attention for a sponsorship, so we didn't serve soda. I told him that, and he said, "I don't think you heard me. I wanted Diet Coke with a lime wedge." I was pretty confused because I made it pretty clear we didn't have Coke or any soda. It turned out he wanted me to walk next door, buy him a Coke, and then bring it in and serve it to him. I told him as politely as I could that this was absolutely not happening. He then picked up the porcelain teacups we put at each place setting and threw them on the ground, shattering them and cutting open my ankle just a bit. The whole cafe went quiet. I just stood there, looking at the mess of broken china. These were beautiful, rare cups that were impossible to replace. I just didn't know what to do as an 18-year-old facing up against an aggressive older man. Fortunately, just a few seconds after the cups hit the floor, a man got up from his table across the cafe and walked over. He then reached into his back pocket and showed the man his badge. He was an off-duty police officer. The guy did not get his Coke with a lime wedge or any food, but he did get taken into custody and administered a ticket for making threats and breaking public property. He didn't let up, yelling, "I just wanted a Coke. If this little girl knew anything about service, I wouldn't have had to set her straight." Listen, I know, when the urge for a Diet Coke with ice and wedge of lime hits, it's serious. But I certainly wouldn't attack a barista or break dishes over it. I can't believe there just happened to be an off-duty cop who caught the whole thing. Actually, I can. But what's really unbelievable is how the guy who threw a fit actually thought yelling about the service and how he was setting the barista straight was a wise choice. What a lunatic. That's the last of our stories about entitled jerks making life in food service absolutely miserable, but check out the rest of our channel for more real-life tales of Karens gone wild. And make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.